Okay, yeah, so we are recording now. Welcome to the GitOps Working Group Principles Committee, April 28th, 3 p.m. Eastern. I forget UTC, but yeah, 1900 GMT. Hi, everyone. So we're going to just quick housekeeping. I pasted a link in Slack. We have a few topics. The first few are just the normal topics that we've been using each time, just that we, the one change is that we now have a set weekly day and time. So that's nice for everyone who can make it, which was almost everyone. But we'll use the same HackMD doc that I will unlock now if you haven't already, Reese. And just to be clear, I think the agenda is we are working toward broad consensus for Principle 4. We are not going to get hung up on Principle 3 for the moment. It has broad consensus in HackMD as it is. There will still be a PR, but the one contention is a very good point that was voiced, discussed heard for the bulk of the 2 past meetings. We didn't have one last week, but the chairs had to step in and decide how we were going to proceed, and basically the decision was, well, we are going to move ahead with the broad consensus, and we will continue the discussion in GitHub. And if there's any other main point of contention, we'll do the same thing. So that, but if another contention comes up from anyone, we'll definitely hear it. We will all hear it as a group because everyone's voice matters. And we'll do the same thing if we can't reach consensus within a reasonable period of time. Okay, let's go ahead and open up HackMD.
So I think if you look at the discussion on GitHub around item number 3, I think there no longer is consensus around that issue.
So let's keep that to the GitHub discussion. We can still talk about it. We're just not going to take up a third week of meeting with focusing on point 3 for the moment.
As long as we highlight that there is no consensus on 3, because there no longer is. So last week at the meeting or the previous meeting, I might have been the sole voice, but if you look at the GitHub discussion, I'm no longer the sole voice. There are multiple dissenting views.
Sounds good. Yep, that is true. Yeah, and the GitHub discussion is linked in the notes. I'll paste it here into the meeting chat too, just for convenience for everyone. But the decision, unless everyone on this call disagrees that we should continue to move ahead, so we didn't feel like in person we were making a lot of headway, and we don't want to spend another week doing that. So we can do that asynchronously.
Cool.
Yeah.
So one of the items that came out of that GitHub discussion, which I think plays into 4, is the idea of whether branch protection is required and a pull request is required, or if something like a hierarchy workflow is actually within the scope of the GitOps principles. So exactly how those operations need to occur. Is pushing straight to master considered GitOps?
Okay, so just quick housekeeping before we jump into, let's put topics on the topic is Principle 4, which you're right about. Let's go ahead and start. I mean, that's cool. You can continue now since no one else jumped in, but let's get back to the hand raising just so that we can, everyone agreed on it in every last meeting. So unless there's objection, I think we should do that now. Does that sound good? Okay, cool. So maybe just give everyone a chance to, the document is, excuse me, the document is now open for all signed in users. And so just like please refer to the HackMD, HackMD link, and just give everyone a chance to read number 4. We do have one note down, just to bring your attention again, we have one note under the notes section below for Principle 4, but that is as far as we got. So the floor is open.
talking about floor open for discussing principle 4?
Yes, yes, it is. Unless there was any other housekeeping item we needed to take care of first.
So I'll.
Christian, I know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think someone posted here that quote change is ambiguous, inconsistent with previous wording, and I think I agree with that. I think also we need to maybe step back in that how someone, and think about using something like interfacing, right? How someone interfaces with the controlled cluster, however you want to call it, controls the operation is done via a declarative. I'm trying to make it easier by getting rid of change, and I think I'm making it more complex. But I think how someone interfaces with the cluster, or how someone interacts with the cluster, I think we should maybe approach it from that standpoint. So the proposal is the mechanism through which an operator, I don't know what that would be a good word, interfaces with the cluster is through a new declaration, or declaration. So that's my thought on starting the sentence out. So I'll yield my time.
Okay, cool. Cool. Thanks, Christian. Reese?
How about the mechanism through which the system's actual current state is modified is through a change in the desired state, right? Something like that, showing that the link that you're changing the system's running state, and you're doing that on the basis of changing the desired state, and that's the only mechanism of operations, is changing the desired state. Which I think is the core here. It's like you should only be able the operations should be through modifying the desired state and not changing the system directly. I don't like how we capture that. I'm not sure matters too much, as long as that essence isn't lost. I yield.
Got you. Moshe?
So I agree with that. So what are the concerns with using the word change? So from where I'm looking at it, you are performing a change from a desired state, from one desired state to another desired state. What are the concerns about using that terminology?
I don't think that was written down. I'm trying to look for it.
Are you going to reply to Moshe's question, or is this just an ongoing?
It's a related comment to Moshe's question.
Okay, then I'll put my hand down and let you go first.
Okay, so from my personal perspective, the mechanism through which change is applied to a system, I think it's too broad. For instance, you might be declaring the composition of a solution running on top of a cluster, but there's going to be changes to the underlying cluster. For instance, node scaling. There's going to be changes to the underlying state of the cluster in terms of where your pods are running. And this is Kubernetes specific. This should apply to systems that are not Kubernetes in general. So also, when you think about change, there's going to be declarations in your desired state that allow for environment-specific change. So think, for instance, you're declaring, I don't know, a certificate to be generated. That certificate is going to change over time. It's going to be automatically renewed. If you think about secrets that are, there's this concept of secrets that are made of other secrets, I forget the name. All those are changes that are happening in the system. That would apply to the concept of change. I think dynamic secrets, which makes me think of change applicable to a system as a whole, ambiguous. We're not talking about change. We're talking about desired state versus running state. So I would prefer to see consistency across that terminology. I yield.
Okay, cool. I'll be really short. I was only going to say that I thought perhaps we could use consistent terminology from the initial principles that preceded it, and that's really all. As much as possible, since they are in order and numbered. What I'm seeing though is that I don't think we would need to use terminology from principle 3, because that's mainly speaking about the agents themselves. We may just, it sounds like we're really talking about the declared desired state and the version of that declaration. But I have only one question. Is the spirit of this, I think it is the spirit of this that we're saying, the only thing I see that really adds to the first 3 principles is saying to fully realize this GitOps principle, you're really only using the first 3 principles, right? You're not using anything else. Or if it is, then those are not considered primary or something like that. But okay, I yield. I just want to make sure that I'm thinking the right thing. Brice is next.
That's really following on from Leonardo. I would actually go to that extreme of saying that that is the system's desired state. The current certificate is part of the system's desired state, and it should be, I mean, it could be by reference, but at least it should be stored in the state store. All of the things that you say are dynamic, the value might be referenced elsewhere, but the fact that it's that particular value at that particular point in time should in fact be part of the system's desired state. So I would really bring those into the desired state, very much so that it's a lot more encompassing rather than narrow as to what the desired state is. And I am keenly aware that a lot of our practical and real systems don't necessarily implement it that way, and there are some very pragmatic reasons why you would not. But I think that the idea here and the core of GitOps is to move in that direction, where instead of, let's say, dynamically changing a certificate, your agent, the software agent that's responsible for certificates, is going to make a commit to the desired state and add a new certificate. And I think that's the direction that we probably want to go, to be kind of more restrictive, more in that direction rather than less, if that makes sense.
Just a quick reply to Brice. I agree, but that's the reason I think change is ambiguous, because I think we're always talking about desired state, and we really would not want to have a change outside of the concept of state. See what I'm saying? Everything should be desired state. Change doesn't necessarily mean that. I guess it's what I wanted to kind of relay.
Yeah, I'm happy to find a better way for change. That's not an issue. I think like the scope, I'm much more keenly interested in making sure that we capture the scope right in terms of what it is that should be declared.
Okay. I have a question for you, Brice, but you can respond in the chat. Moshe, or again in voice if you want to raise your hand again.
So I agree. I think changing the system is perhaps ambiguous, but changing the desired state is not. And whether we include more of state into the desired state or not, I think a pragmatic versus a restrictive approach is better suited. If you go down the approach that the entire state of the system needs to be actually in your state store, you'll never realize that, because by the mere fact that you've changed the state store, your actual running state changes. So you'll never get this perfect match of system and desired. And then you get all sorts of other issues coming into play. So if I have a sealed secret as a desired state and I want that to be unsealed, do I now just commit my unsealed secret back into the repository? That doesn't make too much sense to me. And the same with a deployment. If I have a deployment, am I committing all the pods that get created out of that deployment back into the Git repository. And the same applies to certificates. So I think the desired state should be the desired state that, and if that desired state is making changes of a larger scope, that's fine, as long as that larger scope implements the desired state. So if I have an auto scaling rule that says I can be from 1 to 100 nodes, whether I'm at 20 or 50 or 99, as long as the policy for that state is true, then there's no value in bringing the point in time state changes back into the state store. It adds no value.
Okay, Jesse is next.
Yeah, I raised my hand a while ago. You gave me a lot to think about in between. I think I want to revisit what you said, Scott. So coming from the 4 principles that we've been using for a couple years in slide decks to these, what's the purpose of number 4 here? I feel like, and I'm gonna sidestep all of the word soup. We want to say, really, the only way you make changes in the system is through the system, right? You don't log into the system, there's no SSHing, there's no kubectl apply, like you're coming in through a pull request. Do we need to say that with the first 3 in place? Implicitly, I would argue no, but I feel like we still want to say it. And one follow-up to that for further discussion is the word change, I agree, is arbitrary. I love everything that just happened here in the last few comments, I agree. But at the end of the day, we're putting either a system in place that will automatically take care of itself, you know, for example, cluster autoscaler on Kubernetes, or we're defining recipes for automation to bake, right? Like dynamic secrets. That's all still in the desired state repo. So I feel like we maybe just want to talk a little bit about the intent and the wording might come to us. I am not opposed to the word change. I know it's not used in the other 3, but the other 3 don't need it. Yeah, okay. Hopefully that helps. I don't want to confuse it more.
I see Moshe's thumbs up and then a few more hands. Thanks, Jesse. I was next, and I'll be very short because I'm tempted to agree with Jesse, although I'm not saying I'm 100% convinced that we don't need a principle 4. I just wanted to say that the notes that we discussed about the point, I think Moshe crystallized a very good, or sorry, Moshe, right?
Either or.
Okay, I want to pronounce everyone's name correctly if I can. So, okay, yeah, so the point that you crystallized from the discussion that came up, or I think it was a very good crystallization, is that there is going to be, there are inevitably going to be things running in the system that system is capable of handling that should not need to be sent back to the initial instructions, as we're calling them, the desired state stored in an immutable version. There are some things that we may want that, and some systems have an ability to write back to that storage system. Some GitOps tools do have the ability to write back to that storage system dynamically, so that, for example, pinning or image updating or whatever, so that if a new instance of your system, it just absolutely crashed and it needed to be remade, or let's just say you're duplicating that and that's why you're using GitOps, that new system would have all the instructions it needs. It doesn't have to have everything else that happens to be running, like all of the logging. So I just wanted to mention that if that might be able to be, however that's worded, or however, if that's an important point, we could probably do that as a note on point 1, is my thought, because, okay, and I'm almost done here, is because that is the principle of declarative desired state. So just a thought, and I yield. Brice is next.
So maybe I can elucidate the intent a little bit, and I agree that, I absolutely agree that 1, 2, and 3 are sufficient logically to derive 4. However, as a communication tool and a way to structure how other people are going to see GitOps, I think it's that has been missed in previous discussions. So the idea that you have these continuous state reconciliation, immutable state versions, declarative desired state, all great. But actually in real practical sense, that the idea that you should not be operating directly on the system has been missed. People have missed that notion when presented with the first three ideas, which is why it's there. It's to avoid the potential for misunderstanding and for making that for that gap in understanding. Because I agree completely, right? 1, 2, and 3 are sufficient to derive 4, and if you remove 4, 4 would be the only logical consequence of 1, 2, and 3. But that's why it's there. It's more of a communication tool to make sure that that's not missed, rather than because it's strictly necessary on a logical basis.
Can you just expand 1 to include 4, Brice?
Possibly. I don't know how. Yeah, possibly. I imagine you could. I'd be happy for us to have a go at doing that. I'm not against the idea.
1 basically says that the state of the system is described declaratively, and you could just add in any changes to the system, go through the declaration process.
Yep. And I mean, like, there's a couple of finer points here, right? The principle of really mean it. That's lovely. But like things like a human operator and other systems should both act in that way, right? So it's not sufficient to just have humans act in that way, but other systems must act in that way too. That's an important point. So I wouldn't want to lose that. Creating a new version is the method of operation. You can't, jumping back is not appropriate, right? You shouldn't be either. So you're if you're going to be creating a new version, that you should be do a git revert, or do a git reset hard and then commit that value, well, not really, but like you shouldn't be going backwards in that time, if that makes sense. Your sequence of commits on your control branch shouldn't ever be edited, so you should only ever be moving forward in that. So that's the idea of creating a new state, a new declarative version in the state store. Yeah.
So one thought I had about the comment about whether it's a human or a machine operator, why does that matter? It seems to me it's the state of the system that matters.
It doesn't. Absolutely. Yeah, no, it totally doesn't. But I think people, if you're not explicit about it, and from experience talking about this stuff, people will go down the wrong path on that one.
Please ignore my comment I was being cheeky in my comment where I mentioned human operators here. I think Brice was probably just picking up on what I said. We're really just talking about any kind of drift whatsoever.
Yeah. But I like the idea of, like, we really mean it, principle number 4.
Jesse.
Okay, so I like the principle really mean it. So I just want to be clear, and I'll yield the rest of the time back to conversation, but I think I did mean, I think we need 4. I think we need to accept that it's a little different than 1, 2, and 3. Right. And the reason I think that is because still, and I know you all are having the same experiences as advocates for GitOps, we're still talking to folks that are like, well, I use Git and I use VM, so I'm doing GitOps. Well, no. Okay, now I've learned I'm using declarative configuration and Git. Now I'm doing GitOps. And no, really, you need the agents in place, and you need to stop interfering with the system you put in place. That's really what number 4 needs to say, right? And I do think, yeah, we could add to the previous ones, but I really feel like number 4 kind of hammers it home. It's just, we have to maybe accept that it could be a little loosey-goosey. But I will also say these 4 are taken as a whole, right? The 4 principles must be taken as a whole. So if we have like issues with maybe change again feeling arbitrary in the context of the first 3 principles, I don't think that it is. Yeah, let's just put we really mean it there. That's good.
Christian.
Yeah. So just basically echoing kind of what Jesse was saying. I do believe we need 4 there, and I do believe, which was my original point in the beginning. I think interfacing with, like, me interacting with the cluster isn't done directly, and I think that's I think the point we're trying to drive home with everyone, right? As advocates of GitOps is. I tell them, okay, first with Kubernetes, I took your SSH away. Now I'm taking your kubectl away. Like that's the idea is like, don't touch the cluster, go through the process, go through your Git process, right? Whether it be GitHub or GitLab or whatever, right? Go through that process. And so which is why I brought the point of maybe not to say changing it, but kind of calling out interacting with the cluster, or like how you interact with the cluster is maybe what point 4 should be about, because I think number 1 is self-explanatory, and I think number 4 would be kind of like, yes, we really mean it, but driving that home, saying any interaction with the cluster is done, kind of like go to, right? Go to number 1 sort of thing is, interaction, C number 1. So anyways, yielding.
I've been taking notes straight in the document. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, please do. It's versioned. Actually, no, it's not. But we do have a copy from last time. I put a few notes, by the way, in chat. Again, maybe they're cheeky, maybe they're not, maybe they're appropriate. But I just wanted to draw your attention to it instead of just speaking it out loud. Lothar has his hand raised.
I would like to come back to Bree's point about communication. I like that very much. That made me think of hands-off. So to me, number 4 is about being hands-off of the system. I felt the same when I saw the last comment about interaction. So we don't wanna go kubectl whatever. We wanna say, this is the new declaration, this is the new desired state. Dear system, please apply. I would like to know how you like this idea of having hands off being part of the description.
Lothar, can you just repeat the last couple of words there? Being part of the.
My proposal is to have hands off as part of the description of principle number 4.
Got it.
My gut feeling is it could be even the title, right? So the principle of, maybe this is not appropriate English. Maybe it could be just hands off principle. But maybe that's too much of a change, and there was already a lot of thoughts put into that, so I don't want to propose to change the title. But the core to me is, I don't have a better word. The core to me is really being hands off of the system, but apply it through declarative change, and then some system applies the change.
I think operations through declaration is pretty straightforward for me, personally. What Jesse put in as taking a run at number 4, I like what you said there. I would just take out the word primary, just say the interface, so the folks won't think there's a secondary, and just take that. I think that's good. That says you operate with your system through declarations, and that's it, right? I think that's what we're trying to get across, right? Good. Yep.
I'm just gonna thumbs up. I agree. Lothar, is your hand still raised from before? Or?
I'm done, thank you.
Okay, sure, just making sure. Shlomo?
Thanks. I've been quite a bit about the difference between hands-off and operations through declaration. In my opinion, operations through declaration is stating what it is, whereas hands-off is stating why we do it. So like a little bit different perspective. I usually, actually currently I'm a lot dealing with the question of how to bring GitOps into our IT strategy. That's also the talk I'm going to give at the GitOps Con. So the storyline is that we want to achieve hands-off operations as like the main goal in our IT strategy, and we use GitOps as the kind of practical technical level milestone and lever to get there. That's why I think it's better to talk about operations through declaration here and not about hands-off, even though hands-off is the overarching goal that obviously GitOps tends to achieve. Besides that, I would like to ask if maybe we are a little bit bike shedding here with the wording. Honestly, I feel the fourth principle is very important, but it's just fine as it is, kind of. Like, it's like all like, yeah, well, it says what it says. A word left or right doesn't change so much. It's gonna be fine for the first release. Maybe we just keep it simple. Like there's a lot of consensus room for me for different wordings. That's why I didn't say anything so far.
Got it. Thanks, Shlomo. Jesse?
Shlomo, I agree. Love the beard, by the way. Looks good. I think that was the intent of my dropping that there. If you guys notice, if you all notice, I mostly just took what was there and took the question marks out and picked some words. I did add configuration. I was expecting people to call that out. That to me is the biggest difference. I'm an OS engineer from 20 years ago. Everything's configuration or running state. So I feel like it's all configuration we're talking about. It might clarify, but I don't know if it confuses. So I think if we can decide that, if I'd be good with just running with it sort of as it is. No, it can't come off. All right, it's fine. It's fine. We'll enjoy it while it's here.
Nice.
So just completely saying, I didn't word that. That really is what's there. I just took out some question marks.
And added the word configuration.
Yep.
Sorry, folks. Okay, so
we got to double talk every now and then. It's okay. It's all right.
I'm just trying not to abuse the role of moderator. Okay,
you are cool. Very respectful.
Thank you. Thanks, Jesse. Leonardo?
So just, I like Jesse's approach. Why don't we, so I guess the question number one is, do we think the mechanism by which configuration changes should only be through declaration or primarily be through declaration? So kind of like, who thinks it should be only, who thinks it should be primarily? How strict do we want to be?
As strict as feasibly possible.
I think we cannot contradict principle number one, which says it's declarative. So we can't go in number 4 and say, well, but not always.
Okay, so Shlomo thinks it should be only.
I second that.
Brice thinks it should be only. I'd like to hear what Moshe thinks, because Moshe, I think, may have a more flexible perspective.
For me, I think it's bike shedding. So as long as we, yeah.
Okay, so let's imagine that we say the only mechanism through which a system can be operated against, or something along those lines, like keeping it within operations. The only way that a system can be managed is through the creation of a new declarative state. That would basically cut it, right? The only mechanism through which a system can be managed or can be operated on or whatever is through declarative through a new version of declarative state. I think that basically communicates, can be intentionally managed. That sounds good. The only mechanism through which a system can be intentionally managed, either by a human operator or another system, is through the creation of a new version of declarative state. Wouldn't that summarize it?
Leonardo, can you maybe tell what problem you're trying to solve?
I'm trying to remove the, just like Jesse did, look at the wording as it stands, remove those that are either redundant or approaching the same problem from different angles, get a single word in place that we all agree on, and reduce it to a more focused principle. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yes.
So that's kind of like what I would say. I think the only mechanism through which a system can be intentionally managed is through new versions of declarative state. I yield.
Thank you, Brice.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I still had my hand up.
Oh, you wanted
So
up?
no, it's okay. So just going back to the configuration point with Jesse very quickly. We had the discussion around configuration. We spent a significant amount of time actually with Scott. We spent and we realized that configuration brings in a lot of context that is very idiosyncratic. Like everybody has their own context about what that means. And so it's a word that, while I think you and I probably would agree on what it means, it's sufficiently open to misinterpretation that it was worth staying away from, which is why we don't really talk about configuration a whole lot here. And we prefer desired state instead as a way of capturing that idea. Yeah. And on the bag shedding, I think like, I mean, the entire committee is kind of an exercise in bag shedding essentially, right? But I think that's kind of okay. Yes, we are absolutely bag shedding, but it's probably okay. That's it. I yield.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brice. I just want to make sure we don't miss the comments. And I want to note that, Chris, I don't want to speak for you, but it sounds like that was the last point of what Brice said was your point in the chat, right? About state rather than configuration.
Yeah, I think that configuration is an aspect of state. Just to be consistent with throughout these, just use the word state. It will cover all the bases.
Cool. At least we're not writing a spec or an RFC. Agreed. Okay. Was there something else that would have gotten lost that's important? I don't think so. Oh, well, anyway, Robert, if you want to raise your hand and speak that, you can. For now, Shlomo is next.
Honestly, I'm all the time thinking, what would be lost if you just scrap the entire fourth principle? I have a slight feeling that the fourth principle is more of an explanation of the other principles, or kind of explaining the consequence of what the other principles mean without adding anything new. Maybe we just need to add another word to the first principle by making like the first principle to read something like if and only if. Like to kind of just emphasize that must have really means and no and nowhere else, or something like that, just to make it more obvious. So maybe that's a discussion worth having. If we don't have principle number 4, what's missing?
I would argue that if I have a manifest on my local Git repo that I push to repo and Jenkins run kubectl apply, and then the Kubernetes controllers deploy the deployment, that would still be GitOps, right? If we don't have the fourth principle.
Oh, there's no 3.
Nobody will notice a drift.
You don't have constant reconciliation. Yeah, right, Shlomo. But
right.
that's 3, right?
Yeah. So the independent software agent that acts without an external input, that's number 3. And for me, number 3, it kind of epitomizes the whole GitOps idea. And number 1 is kind of the don't do it manually, but tell the system what should be done as a result.
Okay, thanks, Shlomo.
Just to, just sort of riffing on what Shlomo said there, if we did get rid of 4 in number 1, you could say a system managed by GitOps always has its desired state expressed declaratively, blah, blah, blah. And that would imply both the initial setup and the continuous operation. But I'm okay with keeping 4 as well, just to drive home the point, if that's the point. So
Cool. And Shlomo, you were finished, right? Just making sure. Okay. No, it's cool. No, that's all good. Jesse?
I feel so. I won't do this again, but I feel like I keep bringing us back to this point of 4. So this is the last time I'll do it officially. I feel like 4 is the thing that hammers home the fact that this is how the system works. I feel that there isn't, without number 4, really what number 4 is we mean it. It is the no touchy, we mean it principle. And without it, I feel like the set of principles is a little weaker on that front. And I think number 4, whether it sounds like bike shedding or not, I feel like it's necessary to really underline that and to say, yeah, those 3 things, this is how they all come together. You don't use kubectl apply in this thing, right? Or, if you do, you're going to get reverted anyway. It's like, we all know that that's not a thing, but like, I feel like we need it just as the period, as the underline of the other 3. And I for the most part, I like what Leonardo put up there earlier.
Okay, so Robert is next.
Yeah. So I've been kind of going back and forth because every time someone makes a point in one direction, it kind of makes sense no matter how we look at it. So at first I thought we might be able to drop principle 4, but then we would need to kind of rewrite a lot in the other ones to make sure that they are that they get the point across in a decent way. And I do believe that now that we can have the last principle there as a sort of like yes we mean it type thing, but I think the wording needs to be easier or at least less than what it is now, to kind of match how the other principles are explained. If that makes sense. That's about it.
Thanks. Brice?
So just a kind of housekeeping. These numbering were purely for our use to discuss each individual point of principle 4 separately. I don't think they're intended to make it to the final version. These are just purely for our use to help discussion, to break down these things into kind of separate concepts.
Maybe we leave them. Maybe they actually serve a purpose.
Sorry. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll raise my hand now for myself. Follow myself. So yeah. I don't totally agree with that last point, Brice, only because if you were to take 1 and 2 out of order, you're describing 1 into, whether or not they have to have numbers associated with them or Roman numerals or symbols. I mean, I don't think that really makes any difference. I think practically speaking, it's valuable to say principle number 2.
I don't mean the principles. Wait. let me be very clear. Within principle number 4 are numbered clauses, sentences.
Okay.
I don't mean the principles. I think it's very useful to have principle 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, whatever we end up with. But I mean, within principle number 4, there are some individually numbered clauses. These are not intended to make it to the final product. They're just intended as a tool locally. That's what I was talking about, not the actual principles.
I misunderstood. Thank you. Okay, Leonardo's next.
Just a very quick comment. I think the principles should be like super condensed and short. Like if you touch 4 points in a single principle, it might get diluted. Like if you look at all the rest, they're like basically one sentence, short sentence that clearly compresses the whole concept. I would like to keep 4 as condensed and as punctual.
Okay, so just in summary, there, and Brice, is that you writing this? Let's see, the proposals below. I find that to be very helpful. I don't know about the rest of you, but Brice has been taking notes on all of the proposals so far. And what I'm seeing is there was an attempt to edit below or above, just below number 4, and then proposal A, B, C, and D. I don't know if we need to capture what Leonardo just suggested about keeping it terse, but maybe that can just be a decision-making criteria to think about when looking at the different proposals, because some are more terse than others. Do we have?
I would go with succinct, Scott, as a better word than terse. Succinct basically says we have just enough and we don't need any more.
I agree. That is better for what I meant to say. So do we want to, at this point, are there other points of view besides what's been recorded here, or do we want to now kind of weigh those weigh the value of those 4 against one another? Just in the spirit of not repeating ourselves unnecessarily.
Yeah, so the idea behind adding names to those is we could do a quick round and like we can just start comparing them, right? If we do we prefer A or it doesn't matter which, like we can do a relative weighing and then we'll end up with one that's better and then we can just move that up. That seems like a productive way of doing it. Like literally, we take A and B and like we have a vote, which one do we think is better, A and B? And then we compare the winner to C and then the winner with D and so on. And then we'll have one that's kind of generally agreed to be better than the others as a proposal. I don't know whether that mess of words made sense, but should I just run it?
Yes, I had one more thought. Raise hand. It's not really very different from C. It's just, it's only one slight different proposal, is that it's essentially the same thing that we're saying, but proposal A and B both basically point to principles 1 and 2. Essentially 2, the version of that state. I think we also probably mean that we need principle 3 too. Proposal C spells it all out in kind of long form. What about we, instead of just pointing to say 1 or 2, why don't we just say the first 3 principles or something like this? So I guess what my proposal is.
Be explicit about it's a summary.
Exactly. Be explicit about essentially proposal B, but instead of is operated through the creation of new version of desired state, which is 1 and 2, just say the first 3 principles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it.
How would you write that?
I'll write it right now as proposal E.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't understand exactly what you meant.
Okay, sorry.
You lost me somewhere.
Yeah, I probably did not explain myself correctly, but okay, proposal E.
Ah,
Jesse.
nice
It's
thought.
like it's like a self-referencing principle. I like it.
Yeah, it kind of explains the entire principle very short and concise, which I like.
I like it too.
Yeah, me too.
Yep. I think the only piece of information that's really missing is, well, not really missing, but like the distinction between human and software operators was made explicitly from feedback from conversations. So I think that's worth, I don't think it needs to be in the principle, but I think that we probably don't want to lose that. Sorry, I kind of spoke out of turn, but we probably don't want to lose that idea. So this is what I meant. I've always mentioned in the comment, right? I think these require explanatory notes below, and that might be better moved to explanatory notes. Sorry, I'll apologies for the.
That's totally good. Can I just amend my proposal for a second by introducing the word that Leonardo intentionally operated on? Because really, I think what Chris's point was before, if I remembered correctly, is that it really doesn't matter if there's a human or a robot that does the work of a human or something like this. We have other systems that do things for us. So it's not always just human. What we're talking about is intention. That's what we could say the word desired again, but I think like really it's kind of like an awkward sentence. So we're really talking about what we intend to operate on, because we recognize, like Moshe said, there are things that are going to happen on the system, whether we're just talking about timestamp, things that are not really part of what should be part of a declared state for the system to run properly. So I'm amending it by introducing the word intentionally as Leonardo suggested. Okay, who's next? Jesse.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Oh.
That's the reason I brought intentionally up the first time.
Oh.
I don't actually like human, or I just like operated, because it's a bash script. It's my hand, my keyboard doesn't matter to me. The intent is what matters. So I agree. No, that wasn't the point. My point was just agreeing with intention. My point wasn't saying that's not what I meant.
I didn't think it was, but still.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Okay, so then, and then there's also proposal E1, which is, introducing human or machine into this instead of the word intentionally. Okay, so do we want to just...
No, both. Just to look at it. I need to see stuff written in order to think about it.
Well, since no one else's hand's raised, and since you wrote that, Shlomo, what do you think about it now, seeing it written?
Sounds a bit awkward, but I would think that in 2021, it's very important to emphasize that this is true for both human and machine-driven changes, as I believe it's still a novel concept for many people that machines can do operations. So that's actually what I liked in the previous long version of the principle, that it makes it very explicit that either a human operator or another system. So machine is just short for another system. I was all the time thinking about another question, which is that I think we have consensus that all these principles, they hold true for regular operations, not for emergency changes. So I was wondering if we should kind of put in this hint that exceptions are exceptions and a crisis remains a crisis, and then you do whatever you need to do, and not like faithfully stick to these principles and sink with the ship. I was just thinking how I could add into E1 maybe another word like regular operations, or I don't know, day-to-day operations. I don't know what kind of.
I think that's where primary was. If you swapped primary in for only, I think you would get what you're looking for.
Primary doesn't connotate, at least for me as a non-English speaker, that the secondary will be used only in case of an emergency. Primary for me means, well, that's the one I normally take, but when I forgot my primary key at home, I have the other key, I don't know, somewhere else.
That feels like bike shedding, but I hear you. That's
Like-
like, I mean, if in the spirit of what you said before, which I'm totally down with, like, let's just get some words down. I think primary works. I'm totally fine if it doesn't, but that's why it was there for,
Okay.
because only is pretty rigid.
So Roberts, you've had your hand up for a little while.
You did, however, it's 3:59, and I just want to, or sorry, it is 1 minute until this ends. I don't want to cut anyone off. But if I don't end on time and we go over, that would be bad for people on the call, possibly. Can I just take the temperature of the room?
Let's just take
Is
a
there-
quick vote.
Yeah, is there
So-
anyone who cannot, who has a hard stop? And if there is, we can stop it.
I have a soft hard stop. I don't know.
So 5-minute extension.
5
Just
minutes
use it.
should be fine.
Sounds
yeah.
good. Okay. All right, then, Robert.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think that human or machine probably don't need to be in it because we're referencing principles that already states that it's either human or machine. So it's kind of implied by doing that. And the fact that we're saying that the only mechanism through which a system can be intentionally operated on is through these principles kind of doesn't leave much to the imagination, but we want the short versions, right? We want the these are the principles, and then we're gonna have a more explanatory section later on, going through some of the variants here, and maybe there we can say that if there is an emergency, obviously you can do things to the system, but you should then try to correct that by getting your state back in order, right?
Thanks, Robert. Brees. And also, by the way, can we keep these to maybe 1 minute replies for the moment, just because of our 5 minute?
I'm done. Thank you, Robert, for making my point. That's exactly what I wanted to say.
Okay, great. Then in that case, should we do, does anyone feel that we're not ready? Okay, cool. I see the note that Shlomo wrote in proposal E1. Thank you, Shlomo. Are we ready to do just like a quick thumb? Can everyone use the access the reactions? If you cannot, just speak.
I wanted to use the reactions to approve.
Yeah, I was
Yes.
thinking.
Yes.
If you can't use the reactions, please use the reactions in order. To let you know.
Too bad there's no thumbs down. Okay, so we've got A, B, C, D, and E.
So Scott, I'm not even seeing those at all. So
You
Oh,
don't
right.
see them. I'm
Chris,
sorry.
they're
let
on
me-
the HackMD file. Chris, have you got that in
let
front of you?
me- Sorry, Chris, 1 second. Here they are.
Share the screen. Okay, like this.
I could share the screen. I probably should have, but I pasted it in the chat instead. So I think what we've been discussing thus far, the most recent iteration that we've been discussing has been E. But let me just ask that first. Does anyone think that any of these besides E would be the one you would like to vote on? Please raise your thumb. We'll give it a minute where you can speak.
So I kind of agree that only is harsh here. I would say maybe the expected mechanism or something like that, because there will be exceptions. And there will immediately be exceptions. So only is going to immediately fall apart, I think, in this case.
No, I think he's asking for the vote of anything other than E.
Oh, I thought you said you wanted E.
I did.
Right.
That's
Did
a
you
good.
say you
That's a
wanted E?
good.
Well, yeah. Can you clarify what you're asking? I guess because now.
Sorry. Yeah, you're right. It is almost an ambiguous question. Let me be quick about this to keep up in our time. It sounds like everyone thinks that E is the direction we should go, better than all the others thus far. Is that true? Can we get thumbs up, and then we can, if there's some wording changes, we can do that.
I'm kind of sorry that E lost the word state, because I think state change is what this is all about.
I think it feels like E's the direction we have a consensus on the direction of E, but it seems like E's got more work to be done. Okay, I see a lot of nods on the. I can't see the chat because I'm sharing my screen, but I see a lot of people nodding.
Yes, we got all the thumbs up. Then why don't we go ahead and replace that and make the notes that have just been raised?
I mean, it's like the expected mechanism through which system state change can be done is through these principles.
Yeah.
I think for now we accept E, and maybe next meeting we work on 3 and 4 and tidy them.
I have several points to why we should not reference state here, but obviously time is up now. So
can we do this, because this is exactly what we asked Moshe to do, which he did, or actually rather we made a discussion and invited Moshe to make his point there, right? Can we take the contentions that were just raised and bring them into a GitHub discussion so we can have this asynchronously? And then if we can find consensus, at least broad consensus through that consensus, not unanimity, then we can proceed with the first non-V1, pre-release version of these, and go from there. Does anyone have an objection to that? Okay, it sounds like no. So we're at 4:05. Bye, Christian. Bye, everyone who has to drop at 4:05, and also just bye to all of you. Thank you so much. This was very productive. Every single person.
Thank you, Scott.
Right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all. Thank you so much for the moderation, Scott.
Yeah. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.